Welcome to Garden Success with Stephen Brueggerhoff, the show designed to help you have a bountiful garden and a beautiful landscape. Call in now with your lawn and garden questions at 979-845-5689 or email your questions to gardensuccess@tamu.edu. And now, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff.
Well, howdy and good afternoon, friends. Thank you so much for joining us for Garden Success today. I'm really delighted to tell you that the weather is changing. In the Brazos Valley, we've been experiencing less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's hovering somewhere a little bit around the low 90s. So we're really delighted with that. And of course, we've got a few scattered showers coming in and out, which is wonderful for our gardens and our peace of mind. I don't know about you, but about a week ago, I couldn't stand to be in my garage. It was very challenging, especially out working in the gardens. But yesterday I came home and it was actually cooler outside than it was inside my garage. So I was really delighted about that. And that does affect, how we interact with our own landscape. If you have a chance, we'd love for you to call in 979-845-5689. Talk about some of your successes out in the gardens and maybe, some questions that you have about practices that we're currently involved with. Now, today I wanted to focus a little bit on a topic that I had talked to one of our loyal supporters and listeners, Suzanne. Suzanne was involved with raising some vegetables by seed, and I wanted to go through some process for how we do that. Now, Suzanne, I thank you very much for, of course, for posing the questions and involving me in the process as you've been going along with the success of raising, I think it was cabbage and possibly broccoli from seed. But I thought I'd go through some step-by-step with our listeners. They may be interested in raising some plants, some vegetables by seed for a fall garden. Now, of course, we know what the advantage is, the benefits of starting plants from seed indoors. You have a choice. You can either put seed in the ground, directly in the ground, if you already have that prepared for the fall, some row crops, or you can start them from seed indoors. And of course, the benefit from doing that indoors is you can get an earlier harvest. Now, of course, paying attention to some of the plants that typically we would not start from seed indoors, and that's carrots. Pumpkins you can start in containers, but I prefer to put pumpkins in rows and, plants like zucchini and cucumber as well. But, it just makes sense for plants like carrots. We want to grow them directly in the ground. And of course, surface sowing is part of that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So, when you're thinking about putting in plants for a fall garden or possibly even a spring garden any time of the year, timing is everything. We're going to be sowing those seeds indoors depending on the amount of time it's required for each species to develop a healthy transplant. And that could take anywhere from 3 to 15 weeks, depending on the species. So for plants like lettuce or broccoli, cauliflower or cabbage, if you're going to raise those by seed indoors, expect that you will get germination within 5 to 10 days. Again, lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, we think of those as cool season plants. So give them about 5 to 10 days to germinate. If they haven't germinated within that time period, of course, you'll also have to kind of review everything that you've done to see if those plants, if there's something that you need to modify or improve on when you're working with them. Once you do get them up and rocking, you've got to give them a couple of weeks to maybe about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks to actually get them out in the ground. It depends on the growth of the plant itself. Cucumbers, they'll germinate within about 7 days. You can get a crop in about 3 to 5 weeks, but you've got to take a couple of weeks to get them to germinate, to cultivate them, to improve their health, to continue to monitor their health to a point where you can actually put them in the ground. Now, you've heard me mention tomatoes before, I was really surprised with the quick germination of tomatoes. I'll kind of skip ahead to January. Now, I have some individuals, some colleagues and friends that swear by working with tomatoes in January, by starting them by germinating seed sometime even right after Christmas in December of this year, or last year in this case, but for this year, I've had some individuals say, yeah, I start raising them from seed right around closer to New Year's Day. For my purposes, I've tried germinating seed for tomatoes around December, right after the holiday break. And I found that the plants were just getting a little bit too big in my garage prior to putting them out at the appropriate time of year to put them out in the ground. So from my perspective, I think that maybe December is a little bit too early. I tend to like to wait till about the second week in January. You can push it to about the third week in January, but any much later than that, then you might as well wait to purchase plants from a local outlet, a retail outlet. So if you're germinating tomatoes from seed, as long as you give them bottom heat, and I've talked to our friend Suzanne about that, bottom heat meaning you get a prefabricated heating mat that is made for that type of activity, right? They have a covering on them. They're heating coils that are covered with a plastic so that water doesn't get in there and fry your house, from cause a fire from feedback. So they're perfectly safe. They're made for those extremes in environmental conditions that you're working in, and they provide a latent heat to the bottom of the tray that you're working in. Tomatoes, you'll see germination within about 3 days. We were really, really surprised when they came up. But on average, for tomatoes and germination, expect about a week to 14 days. And then, it's going to take probably about another 4 to 5 weeks before they're ready to be transplanted out. Now, depending on your growing conditions and our environmental conditions, tomatoes are kind of the exception. I know I'm talking a little bit further in future into the coming months with tomatoes. We don't want to start them now per se. We should already have them in the ground. If you're working with tomatoes for a fall crop, seed germination should have happened, maybe about a month ago. And if you've got them in the ground, they really should be transplanted for a fall crop. Now, you should already have them in the ground. I've got one in the ground. It's called Lemon Boy, and I'm really looking forward to that when it actually produces. It's rocking right along. The plant is growing really, really well. The cooler temperatures are going to kind of match up with the environmental conditions that I need for that plant to be pollinated, the flowers to be pollinated, and then produce fruit. So I'm confident I'm going to get a good crop of tomatoes from this one plant because I put it in the right time. But in the future, if you're working with tomatoes and you're germinating them, again, give them a little bit of bottom heat, and they should germinate for you within about 4 to 7 days, up to about 14 days. And always look at the seed packet of a seed that you're working with to anticipate when harvest day would be. How many days does it take for that plant to actually produce for you? Estimate all that, back it up about a month if you're thinking about putting them in by seed. Now, on a seed packet, there's some information by law that has to be there, right? So one of those items that'll be on there, there should be some information about seed purity. So when I say seed purity, that's defined as the percentage of seed in that lot or in that package that's the stated species. Here's an example of that. If you have a 90% purity on cabbage, it tells you that 10% of that bag of content, 90% of it is the species that they're talking about or the varietal, and then an extra 10% of that bag is inert material. Could be any kind of crop. If you're buying it in bulk, purity information should be with that. So you're getting if it's 90%, you're getting 90% seed that are specific to that variety. The little packages that you buy should have that information on it. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul. What's more important is other information that you would have on that seed packet, like days to harvest, any information about germination or putting it in by seed. Now again, we do have some of those fact sheets from my website and our Brazos County Master Gardeners. Brazos County Master Gardeners are an excellent group, outstanding group of volunteers that are helping to promote the mission of AgriLife Extension. We're providing to our public science-based information to help us improve our lives, and in this case, it's gardening, it's raising crops, whether it's ornamental or vegetable, etc. We're providing information to you, accurate information, that will help you be successful in your garden. So thank you again to our Brazos County Master Gardeners. For those of you who are out there listening, a little pat on your back. But we do have information of planting charts on our website for the Brazos County Master Gardeners. That's brazosmg.com, and you'll find links to those fact sheets for you. Planting chart as well as a varietal chart. Maybe you're thinking about you're not quite sure what kind of varieties of vegetables you want to put in your garden, and of course we have some fact sheets for that. Now, getting back to it, seed purity is one thing. Of course, there's also additional information on a seed packet or seeds that you might buy in bulk. You'll be able to get that information of how to plant it, how long to anticipate harvest. Now, let's say you've purchased seed from maybe from February 2024, February of this year. On that seed packet, there will be information that will say, best if used by. That could be a date sometime in the fall of this year, could be a full year. So part of the success of keeping that packet, let's say you haven't gotten to that packet of seed since February. You missed the spring planting and you're going to save it for next year. There's going to be a larger percentage of germination out of those plants. So if you've got a seed packet dated February of this year and you don't get around to it till February of next year, don't panic. You'll still get a larger percentage of germination off of that packet. It's probably not going to be 100%. Maybe it's going to be about 90%. You'll get successful germination. Part of that equation is how you're storing that seed packet. So the seeds that are sold in packets, they should show the species, the variety, germination percentage, and any kind of treatments that are applied to that. But the seeds themselves should be kept dry and cool to ensure good germination at planting. Now, if you get a paper packet of seeds from the store, you might want to keep them in a tightly closed jar. Get a jar, just kind of put them in there and get a desiccant. Those little silica gel packs that you often get with your computer equipment or other. Certainly you can purchase that kind of material at a local craft store, but just get a silica gel inside of that just to keep it dry, but keep it cool as well. My garage, not a good place for storing seed. We have a thermometer, both indoors so we can see what's happening outdoors, and we have one station placed in my garage, and literally it's about 5 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature outside, so that's not good at all for storing seeds. So I keep them indoors in a drawer that I have inside of the house. Now you can store seed as well inside of your refrigerator, but I often caution people not to use a food refrigerator for any kind of vegetable or germinating activity, or whether you're storing seed or you're putting seed in it's called cold stratification. You're putting seed in a soil or a media and replicating a dormant season to initiate germination, right? I don't recommend that for a food refrigerator at all. You might have an innocent person coming in thinking that they've got access to food, and that's not good. So make sure you've got a separate refrigerator. You can go purchase or borrow a mini refrigerator out in the garage. I think that's the only time I would put seed in the garage is if it's in a refrigerator. So the bottom line is just keep it dry. If you get seed in a laminated foil packet, that's pretty secure. So just make sure you put it in a drawer and don't forget where you put that seed, or you'll be ruin the day that you misplaced your seeds. Now, a little bit about hybrid seeds. There is controversy and misunderstanding, I think, regarding hybridization of seeds. But if you're growing hybrid seeds, or the advantages to choosing varieties that have been hybridized, now they can be a little bit more expensive, maybe pennies on the dollar, 5 to 10 cents more than an average lot of seeds, true species. But hybrids, oftentimes they're developed for increased vigor or disease resistance. Ones that I know of are tomatoes. They may have been hybridized, or the seeds that have been cultivated have been hybridized to be disease resistant from some viral pathogens or fungal pathogens as well. Another advantage to hybridized seed is they can give you better uniformity. Now, I do provide a little bit of caution if you're thinking about saving seeds from hybrids. If it's an open pollinated plant, and it's a species plant, you're going to get an offspring that looks and acts just like the parent plant. Hybridized plants will not provide that for you. So hybridized plants, if you're saving seeds from them, they're not going to produce plants like their parent. You've just got two different parents with two different qualities that are happening. So genetic information, and that's going to be mixed. So you could get something that looks exactly like the mother plant or the parent plant, or you may get something completely different. So a little bit of caution goes a long way. Not to discourage you from using hybridized seeds. I think that there's quite a bit of benefit for that. And that information will be on the packet that you purchase from the store. Now, as far as the medium, hey, let's get down and dirty. Let's talk about the soil or the media that you'll be working in. Now, I must admit, I made the same mistake, so I'm trying to walk exactly like I talk. But in this case, I didn't. I just took some media from the garage, already had some potting soil in the garage, and I thought, well, I'll try to raise, I had a bunch of leftover purple coneflower seed, echinacea. And I thought, well, I'll just put it in this mix and we'll see what happens. I didn't get any germination at all, and I think a lot of that is because I didn't have good seed to soil contact. Soil absorbs moisture, absorbs water. And so if I've got a tiny little seed in a media where it's not getting access to water and doesn't have good soil contact, of course it's not going to germinate. And so I didn't get any germination from that. There was another thing I thought, just as an aside, there has been a more popular, I wouldn't say it's popular, but another method for delivering seeds. Have y'all ever heard of a product called seed tape? If you've ever worked with kids, you can make your own seed tape. But there are companies that will develop, literally, it's almost like a tissue. It's seeds that are embedded and spaced in a tissue that's made into a kind of a long tape, right? They're rolled up in a package. Sometimes there'll be a tissue material that's about the size of a 10-inch container inside of a packet. It's folded up inside. But the thought is you already have spacing for the seed, right? If you have larger seed, you're going to need to give them at least a good 8 to 10 inches apart when you plant them in the soil. And so the benefit of using this kind of media or product is that you have properly spaced individual seeds. You just put it down on the ground, you cover it up with soil, you water it. Water is absorbed into the tissue. The tissue deteriorates. Great seed to soil contact, and you get adequate germination. I did try that with this echinacea, but again, my problem is I did not use the right kind of media to try this out. So when you're looking at media and you're working with containers inside or maybe a tray, always get media developed specifically for that task. Again, you could use potting soil, but you're going to have better success with a loose, well-drained, and fine textured media. So the beauty of that, of course, is that it's a sterile, that's a sterile media that you're working with. They're an inert mix, so they won't contain a fertilizer. Think of it as like a fertilizer that comes with it. As a matter of fact, if you do have a media made for developed for germinating seeds, I would caution against anything that has a large amount of fertilizer in it. You should be adding that to it. You'll have better, more measured results if you can add that to it after you plant the plants rather than having it mixed in with that seedling mix. So go ahead and get something that's fine textured. We do that again because we want great seed to soil contact. The material is composed of a combination of peat moss and vermiculite or possibly perlite. Those are ready-made mixes. Now you can prepare your own mix as well. Here's a formula that I borrowed from some of our resources with Extension. If you're thinking about making your own sterile media, purchase some vermiculite. And vermiculite is almost like a silica-like, it looks like silica-like material. Get about 4 quarts of that, equal quarts of peat moss, and then about 1 tablespoon of superphosphate and maybe a couple of tablespoons of pulverized limestone. So if we're making a media that has fine texture but also is well draining from either vermiculite or perlite being in that. And we're adding a very mild, a very small amount of nutrients to that mix as well. So because the mixes that you're creating have little fertility, the seedlings have to be watered with a diluted fertilizer solution soon after they emerge. So you've got your media. We've not gone into the details of how to plant that, and I'll do that in just a second. But once you do get them in and you start to see germination, like I mentioned to Suzanne last week, and thanks again for calling in last week, Suzanne, to 979-845-5689, you're going to have to fertilize it at some point. And when you're doing that, use a weak or diluted fertilizer solution from any household fertilizer that you might have. So I'll go into that in just a second. Again, folks, we're here for you. We thank you very much for your support and listening to the program. We always like it when you call in so we can interact with you. 979-845-5689. We'll be here till 12 o'clock, till 1 o'clock. I started off at 12 o'clock and we'll be going till 1 o'clock proper. So getting back to this, we've talked a little bit about seeds, storage, paying attention to the information that comes along with those seed packets, a little bit about media. How about containers? Now, we did mention this, talk about this with Suzanne as well a couple of weeks ago. If you are going to use containers, you've got a choice. You can either use trays, right? And typically those are a tray, they're pre-molded plastic trays. Beauty of this kind of material, rather than gathering something from the garage, is they're already sterilized. They're already ready to go for you to start planting in. So if you purchase them from a local store or an outlet, or you get it from a friend, just make sure that it's sterilized. And I'll talk a little bit about how to do that in a moment. But the containers that you get, of course, they're going to be plastic, and they'll either be trays or individual containers. You can plant in either one of those. There's maybe a little bit of a different methodology for doing that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So let's say you've got some containers out in the garage, right? You've got some leftover 4-inch pots from other plantings that you had, or possibly you have what I call a seedling tray, or a tray that we use to grow plants in the industry. And you're going to fill up that entire container, right? Typically they're about, I'd say about 18 inches long by about a foot, maybe 10 to 12 inches wide. So you've got plenty of space to put in seeds to that container. But you've got something left over from last year. You can use 1 part chlorine bleach to about 9 parts of water, so we're really diluting that. Make sure that you can use an old bucket, or maybe an old trash can, like a 50-gallon trash can, something that you can actually immerse these containers into, fully. Always, anytime you're working with chlorine bleach, you make sure that it's well ventilated. If you're doing this in a container outside, maybe have a cover for that so it's not off-gassing, or you've got adequate ventilation. Don't do this in your garage, because that chlorine bleach does off-gas, and you may be affected by that. But make sure it's diluted, and you can dunk it in, or you can leave it in for an hour. There hasn't been any research saying leaving a plastic container in overnight is going to be any better than just leaving it in, immersed in that solution for about 30 minutes. So I wouldn't recommend to leave them overnight. You might not be able to get to them till the next day, but there's no benefit to doing that. You can just dunk them in, quick dunk, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, and you're good to go. So now you have a sterilized container to work with. Now you can use either plastic. In Suzanne's case, she used peat pots, if I remember correctly. She sent in an email asking a question about fertilizing those seedlings that had emerged, and she called in last week, so we addressed that as well. But part of her question is related to the kind of pot that she's using. So the peat pots, the advantages to using peat pots, and again, they're made out of peat. They're molded, compressed. They look just like a 4-inch container, about 4 inches deep, perfectly formed. The advantage to doing that is that material is biodegradable. It's porous, and it provides excellent drainage and air circulation at the root zone. The cool thing about that also is you can plant the entire pot into the ground. Now the challenge with that, which I faced one time in my early days of learning how to do all this, when you've got that peat pot and you've successfully, the plant is ready to transplant into the garden, you've got great rooting inside of that container. Before you put it in the ground, break up that peat pot a little bit. Now you can put the whole thing in there, but I just kind of score the outside. This would give the developing root hairs a place to go a little bit quicker, right? Get a little bit better access to the surrounding environment. So just kind of break it up a little bit, however that is, and just put it in the ground. Now I have heard, and I have worked with compressed peat pellets. I don't know if y'all have been exposed to that before. I've gone to a home improvement store, and I decided to go ahead and buy a bunch of peat pellets. I bought this separate container that was developed. It was a tray that was developed with holes in it to put a peat pellet into it. They were sold separately. Put a peat pellet in there. The thought behind compressed peat pellets is that they expand. Once you get water, once they imbibe water, they will expand to a tiny little 3-inch tall by about almost 2 inches wide media that you put your seeds into. Now, they will come with a biodegradable netting on them. So once you water them, that netting will kind of break apart over time. The challenge with those kind of compressed peat pellets is you have to keep them hydrated. Once the peat itself, once that media dries out, it's very difficult to re-wet again. This is the best way for me to put that. So whatever your choice, you can work with plastic trays or individual plastic pots. Make sure they're sterilized. You can work with peat pots. I think that those are an excellent choice as well. And Suzanne is using those quite successfully. Peat pellets, I have worked with them and I've had mixed results because, it takes vigilance. You got to make sure that those peat pellets are wet and remain moist so that they don't dry out. So that's one of the challenges with that. But you can start raising plants from seed in one of those methods. Really quickly, the peat pot, when Suzanne sent in an email, she said that there was this white material, and she had a great picture to show us. There was this white kind of crusty material on the side of the peat pot. And my guess on that is that possibly it was a little bit too wet and it was white mold that was growing on the side. So for Suzanne, I did answer your email, but not to worry, just kind of modify water. In the tray, you've got those pots separated, so you've got great air circulation. They're not bumping up right next to each other. So just kind of keep an eye on it. Sometimes we can't help, depending on where we're growing these plants. You might, if you've got a peat pot, you're working with that. Ambient humidity will make a factor in the growth of mold. So, just kind of keep an eye on it and modify watering, or maybe even get a fan in that mix as well, just to kind of dry it out a little bit as you're waiting to put those plants out. Well, folks, we're here for you. We're here till about 1 o'clock. We thank you very much for listening to the program today. My name is Stephen Brueggerhoff, but you can call me Stephen B. It's a lot easier than spelling out my name. But we're here, 979-845-5689. I really enjoy providing this show for you and being a resource for your growing needs. I always like to say you've got great skills. We're just helping to improve the skills that you already have and the interest that you have as well. I think I'll return to back to working with germinating seed in just a moment. I want to give a shout out to some of the programs that are going on in and around the Brazos Valley, in and around town, Bryan and College Station. September's coming in with a bang. It already looks good with diminished temperatures, at least under 100. And so we've got some great programs that are coming up as well. Garden clubs that are meeting, historic downtown Bryan, first Friday of each month. They transform into one big stage on the first Friday with live music performances and art demonstration. Now, if you're interested in nature, of course, at the Gary Halter Nature Center, each Saturday they'll have a birding 101 program. That starts at 8:30 in the morning, and it's sponsored by the Rio Brazos Audubon Society. They invite new and experienced birders to sharpen their birding skills with the society itself. You'll learn to identify birds by sight and sound. You'll use field guides and binoculars, and they provide you with resources that you can use and successfully learn how to do this if you're a novice. So join them each Saturday at the Gary Halter Nature Center out at, I believe that's at Lick Creek Park. So just go on out there, and we'd love to see you out there as well. Of course, our colleague Jennifer Nations here on KAMU FM at 7:42 in the morning on Wednesdays. She has a program called Waterful Wednesdays. So if you could join her, she's the Water Resource Coordinator with the City of College Station, and she provides information about potable water, such as best practices and procedures, as well as safety tips. So don't forget Waterful Wednesdays at 7:42 a.m. on this very same station, KAMU FM 90.9. Well, we have a caller. Susan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just wanted to continue with your conversation and give a little bit of a method that I use that has been really successful for me on growing seeds. And I collect newspaper and use a glass to make a cylinder and fold my bottom and put them all together, and I put one staple in it to hold it together at the top. Then I fill it with my seed starter mixture, not potting soil, but the seed starter loose stuff. And then when it's time to plant them in the ground, I can either leave all that newspaper on there, what holds the moisture in greatly, and just tear my staple out and throw that away, or I can easily pull all that newspaper off if I don't have, roots that are growing through it, and put it straight in the ground to I just have better success than the seed pods with that method.
Yeah. So you're making newspaper pods.
I basically do, and fill it with loose mixture, and then just stack them all together. And it's been I've been very successful at the way that the newspaper holds. And you can't use a magazine because the glossiness of the paper doesn't allow moisture to go in. There's like a wax coating on it. But if you use regular cheap circulars, which are obviously the best one to use because they're cut at a good size, that just holds the moisture in. And I make them, in the winter time, and then I have them all ready for January tomato seeds.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Susan, is it Suzanne or Susan?
This is Susan.
Okay, excellent. Susan.
I think you have a Suzanne and a Susan that are doing kind of the same thing, I think.
I think so. We're all we're all related, so it's all working out.
Yeah.
But for working with for that method, whenever I've had outreach events, I used to work at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center many moons ago. Had a great experience working with, and they've got great colleagues out there. But when we had outreach events at a large festival where we're working with children, we would help them make newspaper pots as well at the table, something that they could take home and then give them some seeds. But yeah, spot on. I think you're right on. This is not just an activity for kids. It really works for adults as well. I really like what you're doing there.
Well, I have also, because I was working with our local FFA teacher and giving her advice and ideas on how to do that as well, because they get, they have time and it gives them something to do in the whole process of making. And I'm all about educating kids. Matter of fact, I used to travel to elementary schools and teach them about growing. But, the newspaper pods are excellent.
They are.
I just keep a whole and you can find different size glasses in your house to make them. You could find probably on Pinterest on how people fold them. There's hundreds of ways you could do it, but the key is getting a cylinder that has completely straight sides going up, not a tapered out side. And if you get a straight cylinder, they're really simple and easy to make. But
they sure are.
I think the one staple is once they get growing in the seed and the roots are all in them, they really hold up well. But I just simply personally like one staple in them that I'm going to tear out and make sure that I dispose of that properly before I put it in my soil.
Well,
outside.
I'm glad you're doing that. That's one thing we, when we're working with large crowds, we really couldn't do that. But I was always like, how am I going to make this pot and tuck it in so it doesn't collapse on the child when they take it away?
Right.
So I think that's brilliant, putting a staple in it as well.
Yeah.
And what we used to do is we would take, I think glass is a great cylinder to work with. I used to take tomato paste cans, right? And sometimes my programs...
Oh, that's perfect size.
Yeah. My program would be like that morning, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go to the grocery store and get a can. So I've got this tomato paste can full of tomato paste inside of it. And then I could eat spaghetti later on,
Right. Well, if you can imagine the way that we used to roll coins, where we had to fold the ends of the coin roll in to make that's basically what you do on one bottom, and you leave the top open, and you've got a great cylinder, and you just put one staple in there, and it really holds up well.
I think
especially once it becomes wet. And
Yeah, I think that's perfect, Susan. Thank you so much for bringing
Yeah.
that up.
Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in because it's been very successful for me in growing, and sometimes we just need in the winter time to see things growing. It just brings joy to us. So I would encourage everybody to try that in the February winter of Texas. That the only month we have. It's joyful to see things grow.
Oh, I completely agree with you. It just brings a,
So I'm enjoying your show. Continue on. I will let you continue.
Well, Susan, thank you
you
so much for that tip. I think that's excellent, and it's great for our listeners to hear that as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what you doing this weekend? Not to be too, if it's traveling, that's great. If it's too personal, no worries. I'm gardening this weekend. I'm taking advantage of the cooler weather. All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for calling in. I do appreciate it. I think that's a wonderful method for germinating seeds. We used newspaper pots with children. It really engages youth, but it's also useful for us as adults. So don't disregard it just because, hey, this is a youth activity. You can also do that as well. So newspaper pots, you can create them using a straight-sided cylinder, just like Susan said. I think that's really inspirational. So thank you so much, Susan, for sharing that with us. Folks, 979-845-5689. Or if you don't want to be heard on the radio, please email us at gardensuccess@tamu.edu. Hey, let's get back to seedlings and germinating. So now you've got a container you're working with, whether it's a plastic peat pot or a newspaper pot that you've created. And you've already got a handle on the media that you'll be using. And I don't use the word soil, right? It's actually mixed media that creates a soil-like product, technically. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. But whatever method you're using, let's say you've got a tray or a flat, one of those longer trays that I was mentioning a few moments ago. The advantage to using trays, of course, is you can put in multiple plants of one or even multiple species in a larger tray. But if you do that, make sure that you've got great separation between them. So, make a little row 1 to 2 inches apart, depending on the size of your seed. It can be easier to keep track of your plants that way, especially if you've got multiples going on in a tray. Always make sure that you remember what you've planted. So don't mix different species in one row. Rather, separate them out into rows. You're just doing this in miniature. Think of it as like a large garden, but you're doing this in miniature, creating some small rows, right? Keep track of those seeds. Make sure that you sow them uniformly. Now, I've seen gadgets to do that. There are different plants that have different size seeds, like trying to think, bluebonnets are the one that come to mind, really large seed. You would sow them a little bit differently in your media than you would, say, like a lettuce seed, right? And there are gadgets, to kind of measure that out. I've seen these little plastic discs with a little opening, several different openings. You can twist a little dial on the top and it'll kind of cinch down to a smaller opening if it's a smaller seed. But I tend to like to do this by hand. So, whatever method works best for you. The point of all of this, of course, is pay attention and pay attention to the seed size, and that'll determine how deep you actually sow that seed. Well, we don't have much time left on the show, so I do want to get to the callers that just called in, and we'll start with Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing excellent.
Okay, enjoy listening to your show again. I am the Suzanne with the peat pots and sent you the pictures of my little seedlings coming up. I know you just spoke with the Susan, but I'm Suzanne.
Yes. And Suzanne, okay. Thank you so much for those pictures. I really enjoy watching your process.
Okay. Now, the Okay, I have a couple questions. First, about the little seedlings coming up. I planted more than one seed. As you can see, I have maybe like 3 plants now. Little seedlings coming up. They're about, oh, I don't know, a couple inches tall. When would I go ahead and clip out a couple of those so they wouldn't, I guess, take nutrients from the one plant that I'm going to put in the ground, in about 3 or 4 weeks? When would you start clipping out some of those instead of, I didn't want to hand pull them because I was afraid that it would tug on the roots surrounding the one I want to keep. So I thought maybe I should cut it out just with scissors or something like that.
Yeah, if they're growing a little bit too close together. I'm looking at the picture that you sent in of the cabbage and the cauliflower. Like the one of the cauliflower, for instance, they're spaced far enough that I wouldn't do that. But and the other one with the cabbage, I see a couple that are like right up next to each other. Yes, clipping that out. Or how much further along have the plants developed? The pictures that you sent, that was that was about a week ago, I think.
Yeah, they're getting 1 or 2 more leaves, so I have 3 and going almost 4 leaves now on some of the plants. So,
oh, excellent.
But why would I'm just going to use one of the plants because I have just the space where I want to put it because they grow so I wasn't going to use all those seedlings. I was just mainly going to use one in the peat pot. And so what would I do with those that I don't want in there? Would I cut them out?
Yeah, you can, or you can, if you have friends to, and I'm not kidding, if you have friends to share some of this with, you may decide to bump them up to another container. You can kind of tease them apart after they get a little bit more vigorous. I think at this stage of growth that they're not going to, well, gosh, wow, this is there's not a hard and fast rule I can give for this condition. If you want to just cultivate one of them, I'd say let them grow a little bit longer, maybe about another week or two, to see which one or ones are stronger than the others, right? Which have more vigor. But of course, you can grow them out maybe about 3 weeks, where they really develop some more leaves on them, and then bump them up or separate them out. So you can do that as well. And maybe if you got some friends, you could kind of swap them out. But if you don't want to, if you don't have the time to mess with that, I know my time is precious and I just don't have the time to do that, I would cull them out. But I'd give them a couple more weeks just to see how they develop.
Okay, but you wouldn't take scissors and clip them out? You would? Oh, you could? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just do it. And you did mention about the fertilizer and the 888 or the 10-10-10, like a water-soluble type fertilizer.
That's right.
I don't have any yet. I ordered some. I didn't know. I just kept looking online, and one video I looked at from, I think, Iowa University, they said to use like a fish emulsion or something like that. I don't know if do you use anything like that or?
Well, you could actually. That's a good point, Suzanne. You can use fish emulsion. That kind of liquid fertilizer it's formulated differently than a synthetic fertilizer that you might have to dilute, right? So you could. I would suggest. Yeah, I think that's a great idea to use fish emulsion type product on the seedlings themselves. If you do decide to go to like a household fertilizer that, a generic fertilizer like I mentioned, 888 or 10-10-10, whatever that is, make sure to dilute it at least by half. But fish emulsion, yeah.
Okay, I think what I ordered was a 2-4-1. Now, is that's not really straight across the board like what you recommend? Is it something different, or will that still work for a bit?
Yeah, that'll work.
To get them going.
That's an excellent choice that you've made. Yeah, 2-4-1 is perfect for that.
Okay, and you would just use it on the seedlings after I plant them into the garden, I don't need
Yes.
to use that anymore. Use a different one. I don't recall what. I think it's 10-20-10. I believe is what I have in my garden shed.
That
It's the kind of little granular kind that you would sprinkle around.
that's
Would that
correct.
be okay just to use something like that?
And if you have any of that fertilizer made from fish byproduct or the seaweed or whatever the product is, just hold on to that and use it as a supplement during the season.
Oh, okay, okay. Do you have time for another question?
Well,
Or do you have somebody holding?
yeah, we've got somebody holding, Suzanne.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll just call back and just ask my question another time. Unless you get if you're not too long, I might call back.
Okay. Well, Suzanne,
Okay.
thank you so much. I do enjoy this dialogue with you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, hi, Joan. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for taking my call. I don't know if you're going to be I don't know if you will be able to help me with this. I sent you an email with some photos of a tree.
Okay, let me look backwards. I bet it was a while ago. How long ago was it?
It was probably yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. Oh, phew. Okay, I feel better.
Okay.
Can you please? It's going to take me a while to really identify this or find it, but can you kind of tell me what's going on?
Well, the county has come along. I live in Brazos County, just south of College Station. And they've come along and they've put red numbers on a number of the trees out here. Some of which have a couple dead branches, but they're otherwise healthy. And this particular clump of oak trees has a triple trunk. And the supervisor of the roads and bridges is saying that these trees need to come down. And so I'm looking at this, and yes, there's some damage at the bottom, but it's starting to grow over, and the trees are huge, and they're all leafed out. And I don't know where to go with the county, because I would really hate to see these trees and some other trees that they've marked come down. And they've also marked dead trees, which is cool. Okay, dead trees, you're taking down. But trees that are alive, I don't get it. So I have sent photos to see what you think, or if you have any ideas of what I could do. I mean,
Well, unfortunately, I'm not able to give advice on decisions that are made by our colleagues or any municipal entity or county entity.
Well, I did ask that in the email, but I thought I would call anyway. So,
but yeah,
okay.
Joan, I found the email and I do see the trees themselves, but
Okay.
The county will have a reason for tree removal, and it could be related to line of sight or potential hazard, a future hazard. I really couldn't comment on that, but there has to be a reason why, and it sounds like you were provided one.
His comment was the trees are rotten,
Oh, I see.
and that's why they're coming down.
Well, I will answer your email, but for now, it's best that I not really comment on that. But,
If you would answer the email, it would be great. I mean, I probably will ask them to get a tree specialist to come out and at least look at these trees. I mean, as you see the photo, it's a huge, beautiful tree. And, I'm not the only one in the neighborhood that's kind of fighting this. So.
Oh, I hear you. I understand. So you live out in the country?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, we're very close to A&M. I think we're about 8 miles away. So, but it's in the county. It's just outside the city limits.
Okay.
And we've lost trees out here. We lost oaks with the drought several years ago, and now we're losing all the cedar. And so to take a healthy tree and cut it down because it's rotten doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I understand it. And again, there may be extenuating circumstances beyond that explanation of why the trees are slated for removal. But yep, I'd suggest getting back in touch with our colleagues at Road and Bridge, or a contact that you have, if you'd like to pursue this further.
Okay, all right. Well, and I will look forward to your email response.
Oh, certainly. Well, Joan,
okay.
Thank you so much for calling in.
And thank you for being available. Appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Well, folks, we've got a couple of more minutes on the clock. Suzanne, if you wanted to call back, I'm here. Or, of course, I'll always welcome your phone call for next week as well. We do have some additional programs that are coming up. I wanted to mention really quickly. Now, I know it's not tomorrow or next week, but at the Garden Pavilion at the Leach Teaching Gardens on September the 3rd, that's a Tuesday, September the 3rd, from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m., there's going to be an educator open house at the Gardens Pavilion. It's a no admission event. It's open to all educators from public, charter, or private schools, from home schools to informal educators. Everyone is welcome. All educators in attendance will be entered to win one of three no admission field trips for up to 30 students. This is a great opportunity for educators that are listening to this show, or possibly for individuals like Susan or Suzanne or Joan, to pass this information. If you know of an educator in your community or in your neighborhood, they can benefit from attending this educators open house at the Garden Pavilion on campus at the Leach Teaching Gardens from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on September the 3rd. Looks like a great program. If I have some time, I'll be out there as well. Also upcoming, out at the, let's see, where is this at? At the Gary Halter Nature Center out at Lick Creek Park. It's being sponsored by the Post Oak chapter of the Native Plant Society and the Brazos Valley chapter of the Texas Master Naturalists. They're having a volunteer day for an invasive plant pull. So we've got some wonderful natural areas out in Lick Creek Park. It's a beautiful park. If you have a chance, get out there and attend the birding program put on by the Audubon Society. But if you have an opportunity, attend September the 14th, which is a Saturday. They're starting about 9 o'clock in the morning till noon. They're meeting at the Gary Halter Nature Center out at Lick Creek Park, and you will be involved with making a difference in conservation of our natural areas out at Lick Creek Park. They'll have an invasive plant pull. There's also upcoming programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. I don't want to spoil too much and give too much away, but there's always some great programs that are starting up again in September. I like to think of September as the start of our second spring, right? We have another opportunity to landscape, work with vegetables for a fall garden. Certainly, I enjoy doing that, and I know you do too. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for supporting us here at KAMU FM 90.9. This is Garden Success, and I'm Stephen Brueggerhoff. We'll see you next Thursday.
You've been listening to Garden Success with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff. Join us again next week as Stephen discusses your questions about gardening and landscaping in the Brazos Valley.